SMU is joining the ACC. They're paying a lot of money to do it, okay? But this is a team that's had a lot of success in the American. Maybe they're a team on the rise with the Brett Lashley. And they drew, I mean, good Lord, just about as good of a schedule as you can get. Year one in the ACC, playing teams like Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, Cal. Their over and win totals at 8.5. It opened at 7.5. And look, I think this team has some good pieces, but I also think about some spots in this team that I'm like, maybe this is not a Power Five position group. You know what I'm saying? I think there's maybe some issues there at certain position groups, but let's get into it because I think Rhett Lashley is a great coach. And I think this is going to work out long term for SMU.
Yeah, they're recruiting at a really, really high level. I mean, Keon Russell, I know it's tough you lose him to Bama, but everyone else, I mean, they're doing it right there, and they got the resources and talent, rich area. Obviously, Rhett Lashley doing there. And yeah, the future is pretty damn bright. This is a team I do buy stock in the future. We'll see how it translates in year one in the ACC. But yeah, you mentioned there is no Clemson, there is no Miami, no North Carolina, no NC State, no Virginia Tech, and no Syracuse on that schedule. You got to feel pretty good about that. Um, so yeah, we're looking at an explosive run game, right? Gap scheme, looking at up tempo offense there from Rhett Lashley. And then Scott Simmons brings, your post safety, not a ton of different versatility there with his back end. But again, they know what they do. They know who they are and they do it well on the defense side of the football. But yeah, I'm ready to get into this here with the quarterbacks. We can start. How about Preston Stone? He's a returning guy. He kind of kicked out Tanner Mordecai last year. He sends him to Wisconsin, who struggled there, but Preston Stone lived up to his high recruiting ranking. I thought very, very good. He's a pretty damn good quarterback. He got hurt at the end of last year. You saw Kevin Jennings come in and play pretty damn well. So you feel good about the backup there. But make no mistake, this is Preston Stone's team. 3,100 yards, 28 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, and he gives you a little bit on the ground as well. It's pretty nice. Obviously, it was with the American Conference, who did not have many good defenses, and they were able to beat up on a couple of those teams. But I do feel good about Preston Stone being a solid quarterback in the ACC, in a conference with a lot of good quarterbacks too.
I agree 100%. Now, injury is kind of a concern. He's still recovering, right? I think Kevin Jennings is also going to play in that week 0 game against Nevada. That could also be because they anticipate beating the piss out of Nevada, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to see both those quarterbacks out there, but you're not going to see a giant drop off, I think, between the two. I think both of them are really good. If Preston Stone, say, isn't healthy or maybe doesn't look as good, I still feel good about this team throwing out Kevin Jennings. I think he's a solid football player. Maybe uses his legs pretty well. I think they're both good quarterbacks, which is why, the floor of this team isn't significantly lower because I think you're still going to get, at least replacement level quarterback play with Kevin Jennings if Preston Stone isn't fully healthy, right? This running back room on a different hand is loaded. I mean, loaded. Okay. It's going to be very clear that they're going to try to run the ball a decent amount, right? And they were a pretty balanced team last year, running the ball 53% of the time, passing it 47% of the time, which is pretty balanced relative to the rest of college football. Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, Kamar Wheaton, Rashard Smith, Derek McFall. I mean, just 5 guys that you probably feel pretty good about sending out there with this team, and you still got a ton of questions on the offensive line, but you're not lacking in talent in the running back room, that's for sure.
Now, how many guys can they say? How many teams can say, I guess, coming from G5 to Power 5, where they have legit, 5 deep running backs that you feel really good about trotting out there? I do think I would like to see them lean on those guys and seeing LJ Johnson and Kamar Wheaton take a step, because their talent is absolutely there with them to do so. And the nice thing about it too is, yes, you battled injuries, but also you can split guys a ton. And they did that last year, where you had, 300 snaps here, 150 snaps here. 200 snaps here. And so it was nice to see a little committee going on, a true committee, because there is not a ton of drop off, in that talent and production from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And I guess we'll see how they continue to do that this year. That wide receiver core, listen, it's a deep room, and it's solid. You could probably play 6 or 7 guys, and they do, because they do go up tempo, and they do like to keep fresh bodies out there. But it's really headlined by Jake Bailey and Jordan Hudson. How much does Jordan Hudson take a step from last year? He's a guy that you saw him do some good things when he was in there, for sure. It'll be about consistency with him, because he is talented. He is absolutely talented. In year 3 going into it, I think he's ready to take the next step, and you'll be, the alpha wide receiver on this team with Jake Bailey in the slot.
I mean, they threw the ball around the yard last year. I mean, just in different spots. I mean, effectively using like RJ Maryland at tight end, effectively using Jake Bailey, Jordan Hudson. I mean, there were plenty of guys. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were like 7 guys with over 24 receptions last year. So there was no shortage of spreading the ball around. And, I don't see why that has to change necessarily. I don't know why it's necessarily a bad thing. Uh, Although, yeah, I don't think that you're seeing necessarily a superstar. I don't think that this room is necessarily a high ranking or highly rated wide receiver group, respective to the other teams in the ACC. I don't feel great about this room, but I'm like, okay, you got a lot of guys returning, a lot of guys with that repertoire with Preston Stone. Maybe that there's some progression there, in that room. Uh, just not necessarily high end elite level talent with this room, right? So, yeah, you feel good about probably your top 4, top 5 guys there, and then obviously RJ Maryland at tight end was very effective. I mean, 34 receptions there for 7 touchdowns. Come on,
Yeah, if
unbelievable.
there's a star on this offense, it's probably RJ Maryland and what he can do creating matchups. And obviously, they didn't ask him to do a ton in the running game, but what he did creating mismatches as a sophomore last year, him and Adam Moore kind of form a pretty nice duo there. And with what you can do, I also like, I think he led the team in targets last year. And obviously, you mentioned they spread the ball around. He had a bunch of guys over 38, 40 targets. So it's good to see that too. I don't, like you said, it's not really a bad thing that no one's really emerging, and it's not really a star group. But again, if you can keep the defense honest with everyone out there, that's kind of how they kind of prefer it, until you get your alpha like a Rashid Rice you had a couple years ago, and can be a 1,000 yard plus receiver.
Right. And on this offensive line, okay, you lose a couple pieces on the offensive line that were pretty good for you, but you also get back a couple pieces. I look at guys like Logan Parr. I look at Ben Sparks there. Both those guys in the interior, I think, are very solid. Very solid. Branson Hickman at center, that's a big loss. I thought he was a very, very good very good tack or center, right? I think Marcus Bryant, White were also really good as well. So that center in both your tackle positions, I think, are severe question marks, and you had a guy like PJ Williams come in there, Caleb Johnson, both pretty highly rated guys with not a lot of experience, right? And you also have to wonder, at those guard spots like Logan Park and Ben Sparks, like they're solid, but you know, what kind of schedules were they playing against? Like what kind of defensive lines were they legitimately playing against? Like I look at a team like Boston College that they'll be playing against, and look, Boston College doesn't have a high end defensive line, but that defensive line, Boston College, is better than some of the ones that they played last year. That's for sure. So
A bunch of 22 and 23-year-old guys.
yeah, so I think it's going to be an adjustment. Now, I do think that if you have some injuries there, I don't think the drop offs. I think if Logan Parr and Ben Sparks both go down, I think that's pretty bad. But I kind of like what they have in the interior in terms of like those pieces that they can move around there. But those tackle spots I think, are huge question marks, huge question marks. And a guy who just coming off an injury like Preston Stone, like you don't want to have question marks at your tackle positions with a guy like Preston Stone coming off an injury like that.
Yeah, I do say the silver lining there is you look around at I mean, first of all, you have a ton of transfers and former transfers in this room. And I'm seeing a bunch of Arkansas. I'm seeing Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Florida State, Auburn. Like you're seeing Miami, a lot of big time programs. So these are big bodies that are, quote unquote, power forward bodies in the room. Now, how do they develop? How do they mesh together? How can they feel good in this scheme with Rhett Lashley? It remains to be seen. I do think that the talent's in that room. I think a guy like King Large, I don't know how much he can give you if Caleb Johnson and PJ Williams goes down or struggles this year, but King Large, first of all, great name. Secondly, a guy that the staff kind of likes. And that'll be interesting to see what he can do as a true freshman this year. Obviously, not ideal to be moving to a new conference and potentially have to rely upon, a guy like that. But we'll see how Savion Bird develops there, behind a lot of those two guards. We'll see how Justin Osborne is. How much can Aaron Chambly give you at tackle? It'll be interesting. It will be really, really interesting. But at least you got Ja'Kai Clark and Logan Paul and Ben Sparks back as well. It'll be interesting to see, the talent is there in this room. And I think they saw it as a need, obviously, and they went out and filled it. It'll be interesting to see how it all comes together, what the snap count looks like, where's the weaknesses, and how they can potentially hide that with this offense moving to a new conference. But the good part is you kind of get to ease into it with Nevada and Houston Christian. And then, BYU's game, you should absolutely win. You got to win that game. And then you get a bye week to kind of regroup, reassess, okay, who's working for us, what's not working. And then you get to move into your comp and figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think there's some positional versatility with Justin Osborne too, right? Like he played some tackle last year, definitely. So uh I think that those tackle positions are going to be fluent. I think they like PJ Williams. PJ Williams was a highly rated recruit at Texas A&M, the guy that the staff liked. Just got caught into a little bit of trouble off the field. Um, that's right though. He's got a second chance here. Uh, he's recruited, I believe, to play kind of interior, but it looks like they're playing him at tackle a little bit. I don't know if you can confirm that or not, but we'll see. We'll see what that tackle position looks like. But Justin Osborne looked good at SMU in his playing time, and he's an older guy, class of 2019, coming out of high school. So I don't feel great about this offensive line because I am worried about the adjustment, right? And I am worried about some of the guys that they lost. I don't think tackle is a position that you should be questioning, um, especially because like some of their harder games are earlier in the season. Like might have to have that figured out by the time you're playing some of the tougher teams on your schedule, like your Louisville, your TCU, your Florida State, all opponents that you play before week 6. So it's very interesting, very interesting. Defensively, look, this team I think overperformed defensively last year. I think they did. I'm not sure how high I am on this team vastly improving in that aspect this year, considering that they're going to be playing. Granted, not a tough schedule for ACC standards, but it is a tougher schedule than what they played last year, especially from a defensive perspective. Okay. I mean, you're playing, like we said, Florida State, TCU, you're going to be playing Louisville. I think Stanford offensively can be pretty effective at times with Troy Taylor there. Uh, Boston College is a little bit dicey there, but Bill O'Brien might have something interesting. Cal has had success offensively last year. We'll see Virginia if they start the right quarterback. Jesus Christ. But I'm interested to see what this defense is going to do against a little bit higher competition, playing against some offenses that might be able to move the football effectively on them. They got a lot of transfers, though. They got a lot of transfers.
Damn it, do they have a type, don't they, on the offensive and defensive line? They like your power four, big named, former, talented, big bodied recruits. And obviously Elijah Roberts worked out coming over from Miami. He was damn good for you last year with double digit sacks. Isaiah Smith, he's there for you too. He had 3 sacks. He's got to step up in a big way. Jafari Harvey, how does Cameron Robertson? How is he playing? It'll be interesting to see. I do think there's a good amount of bodies in this room in terms of talent and size, but it'll be about consistency. It'll be about finding the right guys, the right pieces to fit in Scott Simmons' defense. And again, if you are taking 8 transfers, like to me, that tells you there's an absolute need that was not being met there, pre-spring practice. So obviously a lot to mesh and a lot to figure out, but let's see. And interiorly, it sounds like they like Jonathan Jefferson, excuse me, from Georgia coming over. pair him with Hudson or Harrison Hunt, who was at Miami last year. Corey Robertson's coming back for you, which is a good thing. It's an old guy. I'm looking at a ton of 19 and 20 graduates. And so that's a great thing to be where you're old on the offensive line. But again, like there's a reason why, these guys maybe aren't playing at their other spots. You got to tap into something that the coaching staffs weren't quite tapping into. Sometimes it's just about depth, and they're just buried on the depth chart because there's some, first, second round picks in front of them at these other schools. But the reality is, it's still not a guarantee. They're still, just because they are older doesn't mean that they are experienced necessarily. Although I do like Anthony Booker as an older guy as well, coming from Arkansas and Maryland. We'll see what he can do for you, as well as Mike Lockhart and Blake Burris. It's a lot of transfers, though, man. It is a lot of transfers, and again, it's not something you want to be relying upon in year one in the ACC. But I guess if you kind of had to do a quick fix and you want to look like a Power Four team, you're taking a bunch of Power Four transfers. So I guess that's step one.
I do want to mention breaking news as we're recording this. Kamar Wheaton, unfortunately, out for the season with a knee surgery. So I know we just talked about him being an
Oh,
important part of the running back room. Literally, as we're recording this, with terrible
at
luck.
least they're deep there, but that sucks for him. He's a talented player. Hope he gets all right.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, we'll see him. I guess we'll see him next fall, right? But I guess Brashard Smith, Derek McFall might be getting some action. They might be getting some action in that third and fourth string running back spot there, behind those top two guys. So, but yeah, moving on. The linebacker room. It's pretty interesting because they feel good about it because they didn't get anyone in the transfer portal really. Well, they got just Medlock, right? Who played over there at Utah, but he didn't play a lot of significant snaps over there. Kobe Wilson, I think, is really good. I like Ahmad Walker. Alexander Kilgore is also pretty decent. I think they got a good set here at the linebacker position.
I do worry about the transition, because in certain positions, I do think it's tougher to go from lower level to higher level in terms of speed of the game, athleticism, and the offensive linemen in the Power Four. They move really well. A lot of these guys do, and so it'll be tough to see. It'll be interesting to see, Wilson and Walker and how they adjust. I do like Kilgore. I do think Kilgore is a legit ACC talented type of linebacker for you there. Jaquanis Burns is a former four-star kid. Justin Medlock, you mentioned the guy from Utah. The staff kind of likes what he's doing so far. And I think it's pretty exciting that you brought him in and you feel pretty good about him. So yeah, this room to me is about as deep as it gets and about as talented at the top end too. Um, we'll see how Wilson and Walker adjust. They were very good last year for you. Um, Even if you take a slight drop off, I still think this can be a pretty good group heading in the ACC. And again, this is a nice place not to be weak at because we've seen time and time again teams just get exposed for bad linebacker play. And at least, you feel pretty good about not having that this year with SMU.
Right. The secondary. I think it's a little bit dicier, I think, in this area. You got some guys that have had snaps. Okay. I think there's plenty of pieces, okay, but like we don't know what those pieces are going to look like, and they got to figure it out fast, right? Because the schedule is a little bit tougher in the first half than it is in the second half, in terms of their ACC play. I don't know. I mean, Deuce Harmon is a talented kid, right? We'll see bringing him over from Texas A&M what that can do for your team. It seems like they didn't get a ton of guys in the transfer portal here though, like they did on the defensive line. So maybe that's a sign that they feel pretty good about it. You like Jonathan McGill and the experience that he has there. Um, in Wacobia, I mean, some guys with some decent experience and some good snaps that have played some good football. But we'll see how the adjustment is. Playing against some pretty good receivers here and good quarterbacks in the ACC.
Yeah, Nick Wobia, he's fun. He's a playmaker. He had 4 interceptions, 61 tackles for you last year. You're hoping that he can take a step alongside Jonathan McGill. Those are probably two of your better players in the back end. It'll be interesting to see how Deuce Harmon plays because, I mean, we've seen him kind of in and out of the lineup at A&M. Obviously, you mentioned the talent he does have. You're hoping in year 4 he can take a step and learn about and get that consistency to pair with Jalen Davis Robinson, former LSU guy. Those guys probably going to be your starters there on the outside. So it's interesting to see what kind of depth that they do get, from your Jahari Rogers, right? From your AJ Davis, Kyron Chambers. Is he ready yet in year 3? Michael DeHoyas. right? He's also maybe a younger, more power, hungry kid in that room, and those true freshmen, I think they could be good players at some point, but obviously not in 2024. You don't want to be relying upon them. So yeah, it's about Harmon and Davis Robinson and consistency in replacing Charles Woods and Meganson, who were pretty good for you last year, and they'll obviously be put into a more prominent role than they're maybe used to in the past, but we'll see how they do respond. Um, and whatnot. I do want to say if you're at the secondary there, the punter, or I'm sorry, your kicker, Colin Rogers. He's a legit player. It was all AAC last year. Um, it's a pretty damn good player to have as well. And then you've got your Roderick Daniels. You've got some pretty explosive guys. Rashard Smith as good kick returner as well. So you feel pretty good with your specialists there, moving to new conference. Hopefully, be able to crack open some games at some point with the talent there. Returning kicks and punts, and also having a consistent kicker like Colin Rogers.
Yeah, I do think you play some pretty high level receivers though on this schedule. I mean, I'm looking at TCU. I'm looking at Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, even Boston College. I think that receiving room's fine. I think Virginia's got some dudes.
California likes their
California
guys.
likes their guys a receiver. So you don't want to be weak at the cornerback position. And obviously, having great safeties like Mokobia, right, and McGill, like can, alleviate some of the explosive plays that can happen. But you don't want to be, you don't want to have your first year going into a Power Five, Power Four conference, right, and being weak at the cornerback position or potentially some spots maybe on the offensive line. Like I don't like some of the question marks there. Now the offensive line could definitely prove me wrong for sure. These cornerback spots could definitely prove me wrong. I worry about them a little bit. I don't think those are positions that you. Those are the positions that I would say you need to have settled in before you're going to move up to the Power Four, right? Because there's a huge talent gap there that needs to be met, and some of that in certain positions was alleviated by the transfer portal, but was it enough? We don't know. Looking at the schedule, of course, we talked about this line opening up at 7.5 and it being at 8.5 now. Out of conference, right? You play two Power Five teams, right? But those are winnable games, and you get them at home, right? So Nevada, you get in week 0 on the road. You should pound them, all right? If you don't, there's a huge problem. Houston Christian, you get at home. Week 1, week 2, BYU, you get at home. BYU's not very good. Okay, if you are having issues with BYU, I think that there's an underlying issue then with particularly the defense. If you're letting BYU move the football on you, week 3 you get a bye. TCU at home. Week 4, I think TCU is a good team. I think TCU will probably win that game, even though they get them at home. FSU at home. Week 5, Louisville on the road. Week 6, week 7 you get a bye. Stanford on the road. Week 8, Duke on the road. Week 9. Pitt at home week 10, 11 is bye. Boston College week 12, you get them at home. Virginia on the road week 13. Cal, you get them at home week 14. So obviously the back half of the schedule being a lot easier than the front half of that ACC schedule. I'm actually on the under here at 8.5. I know this is a really doable schedule, but I do question the move. From G5 to P5. I mean, Boston College gave them the business. I know that bowl game was a little bit tough because the field conditions were absolutely abysmal. But I think Boston College is going to be a tough game for them. I think at Stanford, going across the country like that, I know it's a little bit better geographically for SMU than some of the other teams in the ACC, but I think that's not an easy game. I think FSU, TCU, and Louisville are all losses. And I think playing Virginia on the road is also kind of a scary game. Cal, fortunately, get them at home, but I think there's too many games on this schedule for me to confidently believe that they're going to win 9 games. So I'm gonna have to. I'll take the under here.
Yeah, I'll go the under two. I see 3 auto losses and then room for more. It's not something, maybe I'll be betting. The more I get closer to the season, I might go in week 0. I might take the under just because I do worry, about the depth and some of that consistency at certain spots. Well, and the shift is just tough. We've seen them struggle in the past with, your UCF, your Cincinnati's, your Houston's, Memphis, right?
BYU.
You've seen them struggle with TCU in Oklahoma. Yep. And so it's also just obviously Boston College in a bowl game. Listen, I like this team.
Oh,
It's the
sorry,
talent that I
not
do.
BYU. Sorry, I thought you were talking about teams moving from G5 to P5, but
Well, yes, yes, but
that
in
too.
terms
But
of when they were in the AAC,
correct.
some of the top pressure teams were consistently beating SMU, and we saw them struggle with their move to the Big 12. They do get a lot of bottom feeders in this conference, which is nice in year one, but I still think it still means a lot of losable football games. And I think these teams are hungry, like Stanford and Duke, right? Boston College, they're Virginia, they're looking at this game and they're like, this is a game we got to have. And they're gonna get their best shots, I think, from a lot of teams. Um, Especially once they get into October and November, where you could be worried about some depth and attrition at certain spots where you don't have a ton of experience behind those starters. Yeah, I mean, listen, I like the future and the program and the way it's heading at SMU. I love Rhett Lashley and what he's doing there,
1000%.
recruiting and whatnot. But this year, I think could be a little bit more of a surprise than I think some people think for SMU, and maybe what Vegas says too. Yeah, I'm on the under as well.